Well, welcome to the 700 Club. Asleep in their beds. Many of the victims never even knew what hit them. Deadly tornadoes raged through Nashville yesterday, spiking 160-mile-an-hour winds and leaving parts of eastern Tennessee looking like a war zone. At least 24 people are dead in that part of the world, and rescuers are still searching through the rubble for the survivors. Charlene Aaron begins our coverage with this monstrous disaster.
The twister that ripped through eastern Tennessee early Tuesday with terrifying 165-mile-per-hour winds left total devastation in its wake, killing some as they slept in their beds.
It is heartbreaking. We have had loss of life all across the state.
Dozens of buildings and homes destroyed by high winds, and rescuers are searching for people still unaccounted for.
The windows had been blown out, the doors had been blown open, and our neighbor had been ejected from his back house apartment back there into our yard.
Cleanup crews working to remove trees and power lines from the streets. Tens of thousands are without power and many homeless as multiple tornadoes roar through the state, leaving a path of destruction across Nashville. Homes, businesses, and schools totally shredded. This church also destroyed.
I mean, we've been through lots of tornado warnings and never thought that this would happen. It's just shock. It's like a war zone.
The deadly storms hit as Tennesseans prep to vote in Super Tuesday primaries. State officials keeping some polling places open late. Stories of hope are emerging from the disaster. This little boy was trapped by downed power lines outside his home. Firefighters rushed to carry him to safety.
It was pretty scary though, right?
Sure.
But I'm very proud of you.
New storms are forecast to move through the area as survivors work to pick up the pieces and look to rebuild their communities. CBN's Tom Buring has more from the center of the devastation in Nashville.
Tennessee residents used daylight to take inventory of how their lives had changed. Just hours earlier, shortly after midnight, an ambush of destruction forced them to take cover, sheltering from an EF3 tornado.
You need to come look at the sky. It was bright lime green. I've never seen, it was lime green.
Taylor Nelson and her husband took cover just in time.
We were running into our kitchen to go down our basement steps. As we were running down our basement steps, my ears started popping and our roof took off.
Just down the block, in the same neighborhood, Chris Folsom shared a similar experience.
The sound, that they described, the train, the roaring, and it's coming hard and fast. I ran downstairs into the basement. As soon as I got in the door, the roof ripped off.
The long-track tornado skipped through parts of Nashville, where at least 45 buildings suffered severe damage. Take a look at this, wood javelined through the brick wall. This is Germantown. It is not north of Nashville. This is Germantown in the northern district of downtown.
You heard this groaning force that was shaking the building. You could hear windows bursting all around. It was very obvious that Mother Nature had arrived with a vengeance.
Numerous Nashville-based relief agencies like Hope Force responded quickly to evaluate needs of the displaced.
It's just unbelievable everywhere I look. Whole houses, front walls, gone, and people hurting.
At Donaldson Christian Academy, the elementary school wing was destroyed. School officials gathered to survey structural damage and consider their off-site options to continue classes when students return from their spring break.
Where does your faith tether you now?
Yeah. Well, it's the heart of who we are as a community. And I think really, what we're taught is in difficult times, in adverse times, right, that partly it's our faith that carries us through. And so I want people praying for our students. I want people praying for our faculty and our staff.
Tennessee Governor Bill Lee has declared a state of emergency. And later this week, President Trump plans a visit to the state. For CBN from Nashville, I'm Tom Buring.
Well, our prayers go out to those people in Nashville. They're brave people, and what a horrible disaster. Horrible disaster. Operation Blessing will be functioning there, but again, it's just surveying the situation to see exactly what the needs are. Then we want to supply them as fast as we can, along with other relief agencies. But among everything else, please pray for those people in Nashville and that surrounding area. Such a devastation. In the middle of the night, suddenly you waked up and all of a sudden, bang, everything around you is taken away.
Thank goodness so many of them have basements where they could go and be safe. I've been in hurricanes, Pat, but I've never been in a tornado, and I think they seem so much more terrifying.
They're terrible. And, you know, in this area, it's so moist, we don't have basements. And so whatever we're going to do here, I mean, you kind of have to hunker down in the middle of your living room or wherever it is. You've got some walls up, but hopefully we're not going to have them. Well, it was a major day yesterday. Joe Biden shot to the top of the Democratic Pact Tuesday night, winning 9 states in the Super Tuesday primaries. So why does it look like Bernie Sanders will grab the biggest prize? Ephraim Graham has more on that.
And as you said, Joe Biden, a big winner in Super Tuesday's contest, sweeping the South, including Texas, giving him momentum as frontrunner for the Democratic presidential nomination. Sanders, however, making a strong showing in California and expected to win there, and picking up wins in Colorado, Utah, and his home state of Vermont. Biden is now leading in the delegate count and feeling confident after his strong showing. But Sanders shows no signs of discouragement.
We're told, well, when you got to Super Tuesday, it'd be over. Well, it may be over for the other guy. I tell you with absolute confidence, we are going to win the Democratic nomination.
Despite spending more than $500 million, former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg only won American Samoa and a total of 45 delegates. That means each delegate appears to have cost him more than $11 million. Today, Bloomberg is reassessing his campaign. It may also be the end of the line for Senator Elizabeth Warren, who finished 3rd in her home state, Massachusetts. Pat?
Chief political analyst David Brody is with us now. David, you're calling this the Democrats' big freak-out moment. Why do you say that?
Well, look, I think what happened here, Pat, and there was a recalibration on Super Tuesday. Democrats across the country, especially in the South, but in other states too, Minnesota, Massachusetts, all went for Biden. Why? Democrats looked at this and said, wait a minute, are we going to actually nominate a socialist as our nominee in the fall to go up against Trump? And they said, hang on. They pulled back the reins. And look, lo and behold, we have Joe Biden. It has been a perfect storm, if you think about it, Pat, for Joe Biden. This has been pretty remarkable. It makes me think of John McCain back in 2008. Remember him, the comeback kid at the time, and he went on to win the nomination. Joe Biden, even more impressive this time around. Everybody left him for dead, but he had a perfect storm. You know, he had that good debate performance, finally, in South Carolina. Everybody else bashed Bernie in that debate. Then he had the big blowout win in South Carolina, and then the key thing happened, which we've talked about here on the 700 Club, Pat. We said between February 29th and March 3rd, after South Carolina and before Super Tuesday, would there be some of these candidates that get out of the race? Indeed, they did. Buttigieg, Klobuchar, Steyer, and all of a sudden, a lot of that went over to Biden, and here we are. Also, Bloomberg ended up being a dud. Nothing personal there. I just mean electorally. And then Elizabeth Warren stayed in the race, and that hurt Bernie. So you put it all together. It was a perfect storm for Joe Biden on Tuesday. It was a Super Tuesday, or as he would call it, maybe Super Thursday. You know, he's had some gaffes along the way.
What do you think coming up? You know, it looks like the Democrats are rejecting Bernie Sanders. They just don't want to be running with a socialist because they figure those in the down market ballots are going to get killed. So Biden has the momentum. Do you think he's going to win these next primaries coming up?
Well, he does have momentum. The primary road actually looks better for Sanders next week, a week from Tuesday. You've got Michigan, 125 delegates, and he should do well there. And Washington State, where he's going to clean up, and that's almost 100 delegates there. So we could have a different conversation next week. Here's the problem for Bernie Sanders. Florida's coming up. Georgia's coming up. That's not good news for Sanders. Those are big states. with a lot of delegates at stake, and Joe Biden should do well there. And so you have all of this kind of back and forth. Look, I think ultimately the Democrats are in this ideological fight. You know, which way is this party going to go? Here's the bad news for Democrats. Clearly, with the progressive young 18 to 29 folks, they love Bernie. That's the socialism crowd, if you will. And that seems to be the future, the way the Democrats are heading. But the brakes were put on that last night with Joe Biden. Most traditional Democrats saying, yeah, not right now, folks.
Well, I'm told a bunch of those youngsters didn't show up to vote. That Sanders thought he had that huge army of people, and the army people just were deserters they were AOL during the election. What happened?
Well, look, he did do well with younger voters, but you're right. Not as many showed up. Still, he did well. They may have been on their PlayStation 4. I don't know what they were doing specifically, but Joe Biden did much better with folks over 55, specifically over 65, and that makes the difference. Also, what's interesting is to see the difference between support among African Americans for Joe Biden. I think that's an affinity vote as it relates to, their love for Biden because of the Obama years, and then Hispanics are flooding over to Bernie. So there is this ideological fight, and that is good news for Donald Trump because, look, as we move on here, Pat, into the fall, look, if Bernie loses, there's going to be a problem with energy with the Democrats because a lot of those progressive younger voters, if he couldn't get some of them to show up in the primary, are they really going to show up in the fall for Joe Biden? That's a problem. If Joe Biden loses and Bernie's the nominee, well, then Trump's running against the socialists. So either way, this seems like it should be good news for Donald Trump.
Well, the key issue seemed to be over and over again, we want somebody who can beat Donald Trump. But, you know, without any disparagement, and I do like Joe Biden, he's just a nice and a likable guy, but he has more gaffes. I mean, if we put together a reel of the stupid things he said, he couldn't even remember the verses to the national anthem, I think. I mean, when he comes up against Trump, Trump's going to kill him.
Well, it could be disastrous for Joe Biden. Look, I want to do a disclaimer as well. I've interviewed Joe Biden, know Joe Biden. He's a decent man. He's had a lot of tragedy in his life. He's overcome a lot, for sure. There's the disclaimer part. But look, here's the truth. I mean, Joe Biden is winning in spite of himself, not because of himself. I mean, he has had gaffe after gaffe. I mean, like I said, the other day he called in Dallas, Texas this week, he called Super Tuesday Super Thursday. He tried to quote the Declaration of Independence and botched that, said all men and women are created. And then he thought, and he said, you know, the thing. It's equal. So anyhow, the point simply is that there is a reel on Biden. And here's the good news for Sanders. Biden could slip up again between now and the convention. And so Bernie's going to stay in this, obviously. And, we could have a lot more twists and turns. This is like as the world turns. As the Democrats turn, we need the soap opera music, Pat.
All right. Well, David, we're looking forward to your future insights. And we just pray for the country with this stuff going on.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pat.
Well, Ephraim, we're talking now about coronavirus. Apparently, the death rate is up to something like 3%, which is a good deal higher than influenza. You want to talk about that, please?
That's right, Pat. The global death rate of the coronavirus is now up to 3.4%. That is according to the World Health Organization. By comparison, the flu kills less than 1% of those infected. Vice President Mike Pence announced Tuesday the U.S. is lifting all restrictions on testing to fast-track those who fear they might have the virus. In the U.S., there are at least 120 cases in more than a dozen states and 9 deaths. All of those deaths occurred in the states of Seattle, Washington area, most connected to an outbreak in a nursing home there. Pat?
Well, you know, as we showed you the other day when I was on with Laurie, the people who are most at risk are the elderly or people who have some pre-existing condition. And that's been the problem. But we also showed you that if you have a healthy immune system, whatever the virus does to you, it won't have much effect. And we offered something that has been so popular. We have a news alert that we give you free on this whole matter that has been prepared by our by Lori and her team. But we also have something that has been extraordinarily important called Build a Better Gut. Lori told us, and I believe it's true, that 80% of your immune system is located in the gut. These little tiny critters that are down there, and there are billions of them in our intestines, can give us virtual immunity against some of these diseases. And so how do you fight the coronavirus? Of course, you wash your hands and you be careful about all the things you're touching. That's cool. But more than anything, if you have a healthy immune system, and if 80% of your immune system is located with these little critters in your gut, that's why you want this book, and we have had an enormous influence. I've offered this in the past. It was the biggest request we have ever had for anything in the history of CBN. So we'll still give it to you. It's available, Build a Better Gut. So we don't want any person watching this program to get the coronavirus or have any serious illness as a result of it. This will strengthen your immune system. So we'll give it to you. All you have to do is pick up the phone. There's no money involved. We're not charging a penny for it. It's all free. 1-800-700-7000. And we'll give you this booklet on how to build a better gut. And we also, what you need to know about coronavirus, with this little thing that our health department has put together. So we'll give that to you free. And we don't want anybody sick. We don't want anybody dying. We want to look, we care about you. I want you to care about yourself, Wendy.
Amen. And pray Psalm 91 over yourself and your family and your neighborhood and your city and your state. And
now you're talking. And it will not come nigh thee. 1,000 will fall at your hand and 9,000 at your right hand, but it won't come nigh you. Okay.